This tutorial explains how to set the axis limits of a base R plot using the R programming language. So without too much talk, let's dive into the R code. In this video I will show you several examples, and all of these examples are based on the data that we can create with lines 2 to 4 of the code. So if you run these lines of code, you can see at the top right of RStudio that two new vector objects are appearing that are called x and y, and both of these vector objects contain 300 numeric values. Now let's assume that we want to draw these data with default specifications for the axis limits. Then we simply can apply the plot function, as you can see in line 6 of the code, and within the plot function we need to specify the names of our two vector objects. So if you run line 6 of the code, you can see at the bottom right that a new scatterplot has been created, and you can also see that the axis limits correspond to the maximum and minimum data points in our input data. So let's assume that we want to change the axis limits on the x-axis of our plot. Then we can apply the code that you can see in lines 8 and 9. So in line 8 I'm basically using the same syntax as in line 6. However, then I'm also using the xlim argument, and I'm specifying to this argument a vector with two values. And the first value in this vector corresponds to the lower limit of the x-axis, and the second value in this vector corresponds to the upper limit of our x-axis. So if you run lines 8 and 9 of the code, you can see at the bottom right that our plot has been updated, and this time the lower limit of the x-axis has been changed to -1. So you can also see that some of the points have been cut off, and the upper limit of the x-axis has been increased to +5. So you can see that on the right side of the plot, no data points are shown at all. In the next example, in lines 11 and 12 of the code, I am showing you how to change the y-axis limits of a base R plot. And for this, we can simply use the ylim argument instead of the xlim argument, as I have shown in the previous example. And this time I'm setting the lower ylim axis limit to 0 and the upper axis limit to 3. So if you run lines 11 and 12 of the code, you can see at the bottom right that our plot is updated once again. And this time the x-axis is set corresponding to the default specifications, and the y-axis is set based on the ylim argument. So the lower limit is 0 and the upper limit is +3. We can also set the xlim and ylim arguments in the same call of the plot function, as you can see in lines 14 to 16 of the code. So in this case, I'm using the xlim argument to set the axis limits on the x-axis, and the ylim argument to set the axis limits on the y-axis. So if you run lines 14 to 16 of the code, you can see that another plot is created at the bottom right, and this time we have specified the x-axis and the y-axis limits manually. That's all I wanted to explain in this video. In case you want to learn more on this topic, you may check out my homepage statisticsglobe.com, because on my homepage I have recently published a tutorial in which I'm explaining the content of this video in some more detail. I will put a link to this tutorial into the description of the video, so you can find it there. If you have liked this video, or if you have any questions, let me know in the comments section below. I'll try to respond to all comments as soon as I can. Furthermore, make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel to get notified about future video releases. I have already published about 500 videos on this channel, and I'm releasing new videos on a daily basis. Thanks a lot for watching. See you in the next video.